me here is an ISKT3000 space station microphone, which is going to capture the reflected sound from my glass. So this microphone is going to be going into a PSonus Audio-Box 1818 vessel interface, which is going to convert our sound here into digital format. And then on my digital audio workstation, which is my Cubase Elements 8, I've got a spectrum analyzer, the default one, cross-checking the signal that is coming from my ISKT3000 microphone. So I'd like to see how this glass is going to respond when it's empty, like its natural sound, and then when we add the rice, and then when we add smaller grains, which is a substance of sugar, and then with more finer grains of flour, and basically checking how these parameters like grain size and density influence the type of reflected sound that is going to come from our glass. So to begin with, I'm going to be using this spoon to transfer my my incidence energy onto the glass. I just hope I won't break the glass. So let's listen to how this glass sounds naturally. So this is how our glass sounds naturally when it is empty, with nothing in it. And then to my first example, I'm going to be using rice. Rice is an organic substance, in this case rice that we usually eat it, or this is the rice I'm talking about. So I'm going to add a little bit of rice, probably fill this glass of wine or scotch to the mid-level, and see how the glass is going to respond to the incident energy, or basically the reflected energy. Rice. It's funny how most people enjoy this on Christmas. Rice, really. So I think this amount of rice will do to test. So I'm going to strike this glass 3 times, and let's see how this glass is going to respond to the incident energy. Put it 3 times. Slight change in terms of the tonality of the glass. Huge particles, huge grains. So let me use now a second example of a powdered material which is more dense than rice this time, which is sugar, with smaller grains as well, and see how this glass is going to respond when it comes to energy. That's a lot of sugar. Diabetes, I see you. Diabetes. So a second example is sugar this time. Let's see how this glass is going to respond. More or less the same, yeah. And then our third and final example. Just flour, finer substance, well ground. I see cake. I also see diabetes. Hey, the combination of diabetes and sugar is a very interesting one, a very beautiful relationship. And render you sick at the end of the day. Let's see how this is going to sound. So I think there's quite a significant change in terms of the sound there when it comes to flour being put into this glass. The sound basically is being absorbed more by the flour as compared to the sugar and the rice respectively. And then the reflected energy at the end of the day has got frequencies that are subtracted from the natural sound of your glass. And then as we tip this glass, we get to hear different sounds coming from it with different materials. And also I've got an interesting one. I've got a tie. I'd like to see how the same glass is going to respond when put a tie in it. It's a different type of sound. It's more, there's less of the mid to high frequencies range when you put a tie. So now like to see how viscosity plays a role in terms of determining the type of sound that is reflected from a glass. So going with my first example is going to be water. To fill this glass with water and see how the viscosity of this liquid is going to determine how our glass is going to sound. If there is any change in tonality, see how this sounds. Pretty significant change, shift in frequencies as well, to a pretty warmer tone. Yes. And then the last example, but not the least one, is me getting to use the dishwashing liquid to see how this glass is going to respond. It's a pretty interesting material. Wow. Even COVID-19 is scared. Green fluid, green power. I hope vaccines would have been easily made with the greenish material. So let's see how this viscosity of these two might contribute to the difference in sound of this glass material we have. Interesting sound. The tonality has also changed, and a couple of frequencies have been rolled off from our glass as we've treated our glass with dishwashing soap or liquid. So the whole point of this experiment really has been how we would get to see how different materials respond when layered with other ones, or different materials in terms of reflected energy. I've been doing a little bit of research for the past 5 years regarding material physics, especially in this interesting area of treating instruments with different materials to determine the reflected energy at the end of the day. For instance, on a kick drum, in 2015 I experimented with placing a couple of packets of cement inside the kick drum, and what I realized was because of the density of the cement and the small particle sizes of the cement, the energy that was transferred into the kick drum was mostly absorbed by the cement, giving a more tighter kick sound that is pretty nice and is usually associated with rock. And you see that most people or most engineers when mixing go through a lot of processing to achieve that type of a kick drum sound. But when you get to experiment with putting a little bit of cement inside, you find that the cement will absorb all those unwanted frequencies you get from the usual kick drum setup that we have, to get a more nicer, tighter kicking sound. And then I also placed different materials like mauswa, which is grass. Also put maize meal. I also put sand, and the results are actually amazing, especially when you did a frequency analysis of the sound that you got from the kick drum. You find that there's infinite possibilities of sound, especially when you treat those instruments with various materials of varying size in terms of grain size, of various densities, or even fluids with different viscosities. So, also, one other interesting thing I noticed with guitar, my sweet acoustic guitar, it's quite nice. Guitar players, have you noticed that when you play this instrument with the guitar free from your body, I'll play from the sound hole and I'll play a beautiful chord here. You find that there's a different sound that comes to it when it is away from your body. Let's see. Versus when this guitar body is resting on your body of flesh and blood. Let's see how this guitar is going to sound. A pretty magnificent, noticeable change here. So what is basically happening is, when these strings are resonating as you pluck them, the energy is transferred to the guitar body, which is your incidence energy. And then this guitar body is wood, which is nice material. It absorbs it. And then the rest of the reflected energy is actually amplified by the hollow aspect of the body, and comes out as part of the guitar hole, sound hole. And some of it is also reflected from the rest of the body here. But now, this is what naturally happens to it when you're playing it away from the body. Now, when you place it on your body here, some of that energy is then transferred or passed on to your human flesh and blood. And then the human body, what it does, just absorbs a couple of frequencies there, and then the tonality of the guitar becomes warm as you place it here on your body, was the guitar body rests on yours in terms of the chest versus when it is away. So it's quite interesting on how sound or incidence energy behaves when you treat different acoustic instruments with different materials, including flesh and blood. Yes. So I hope you've enjoyed this interesting subject of material physics, on how sound is generated from our materials and how we could manipulate various parameters of different materials that we could add to the primary material that is made from, that actually makes our instruments to come up with different type of sound, or also to come up with different type of instruments, because this journey of shaping Zimbabwe sound should also empower us in developing our own instruments, not just sticking to the ones that are manufactured. We need to grow in terms of sound and in terms of creating a futuristic landscape in terms of music. So I'd like to thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you've enjoyed this one. Happy 2020.